Good.
I think so. This is a pretty big endeavor for us. We're two small town Wisconsin boys.
Okay. Well, it looks like you're doing fine to me.
Yeah. So we met Greg here at ATA this year in 2019, and that was a pretty big deal for us. We were never allowed to go.
By your wives or by who? By the ATA? Probation? What? What are we talking?
We never had the opportunity to go, I should say.
Yeah, from the shop itself. So
Gotcha. So this is your guys' podcast. So let me ask a question. Not about the cough. So do you guys have a pre-recorded intro, or do you guys just jump into it BD like I do? Because some folks like to have an edited intro. I don't give a shit, so I just start talking. What's your guys' plan?
I actually paid $5 to some graphic designer to make me an intro, which is the intro that's on our Facebook page right now.
Ah, gotcha. All right, I'll have to go check that out. So that happens in post-production. Got it.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right. What do you guys got going on, man?
So, well, you met us at ATA, so we didn't give you kind of our backstory. We met at our shop. We're two bow technicians, and we grew to be the two best bow technicians in our shop by never sitting still and never settling, especially for customers' bows. So we would, start by ripping apart our own bows and then work on our own bows, get it tuned to the best possible way. And then what I didn't want to happen, but what ended up happening was meeting all the pros at ATA. So I went into ATA telling myself, all right, I really don't want to rip apart my bow when I get back from ATA.
How'd that work out for you?
I ripped it apart the minute we got back. And we got back at like midnight that night?
Yeah, it was pretty late. And yeah, the tear apart started right away. After day one of ATA, we're like, yeah, it's happening. So
well, so let's get a little backstory here for the people listening and myself. First of all, how long have you guys even been shooting a bow? Because everyone seems to think I've been shooting a bow for 5. I didn't even start shooting a bow till I was 30. So, and I'm 48 now. So I started, and I'm not going to pontificate on, if I had started when I was young, pretty much nothing different would have happened if I'd have started when I was young. I'd have been getting my ass kicked by Dave Cousins like everybody else. So, I've been doing this by, I guess, today's terms a long time, but how long have you guys been shooting a bow? How did you get into it? Kind of give me some of that, because you don't just, obviously you had to have some sort of mental acuity, lack of moronic tendencies to even be working on the bows at a decent level anyway. So kind of bring me and the people listening up to speed on how you got to where you got.
I'll let you start, Josh.
All right, yeah, I started bow hunting when I was young, and even before that with youth bows, just flinging them up in the air and counting them coming down. So I've been shooting bow my whole life basically, but never competition until I started at the shop about 2 years ago now, just about 2 years ago, after meeting him actually, and that's when I finally started doing like competition. Besides, like techno hunt leagues and stuff like that, I did that all the time. But everything was hunting related for me. I never thought I'd get into shooting at spots, And then
I started 3 years ago by mountain biking. So right where I live, I used to mountain bike almost every single day, and my buddy bought a bow off Craigslist because right next to the mountain bike range is our little archery range with like hay bales and stuff. So it's a Milwaukee public range.
Gotcha.
He bought a bow on Craigslist with 6 arrows. We shot all 6 arrows in the air, like missed the bale entirely, and then from there we were hooked. I bought my first bow on Craigslist, so I have like this really addictive personality in that like anything I do, I go full blown.
Right.
in that, I've only been shooting for 3 years. In that first year, I owned maybe 20 bows. In the 3 years that I've been shooting, I'm on bow number 51.
The archery industry thanks you.
Yeah, so it's been crazy. I don't hunt. We're actually talking about doing my very first hunt in Nebraska this year. So I don't hunt as of yet. I strictly do target archery, and I love target archery. And when we first started working together, because I was staff shooter at the shop first,
Right.
and then they were kind of short staffed, so they asked me to come in. I didn't work on any bows yet. I barely knew how to tie a D loop. The first D loop I tied like blew up in my face, and I gave myself a pretty big welt. So from there, we just went on tons and tons of YouTube, tons and tons of YouTube channels. So like the big ones were like you and Dudley and Riles and
Dan McCarthy.
Dan McCarthy,
Yep.
all of the Lancaster videos, like as
Right.
much as we could. And then we would never dare start on a customer's bow, so we ripped our own bows apart down to like the bare bolts, and then put it all back together, and that's how we learned.
Nice. Well, I mean, look, you know, and I say it all the time, you got to crawl before you ball. And, you know, a lot of people think I'm just joking, but look, I didn't start off shooting tournaments either. I was a quote unquote hunter up in Oregon. I traded a wooden gun cabinet for a Matthews Conquest 2. That was my first.
I had one of those.
I mean, who didn't?
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's where I started with that, and I was hunting, and my friends up there were like, "Greg, you got to come to this tournament. It's in Wairika. It's only about an hour and a half away," and I'm like, "Beatbox on that target crap. I'm a hunter." And they're like, after a few weeks, they're like, "Well, it'll make you a better hunter." And I played highly competitive basketball, so I get it. Practice makes you better, and okay, I get it. So the very first tournament I went to, unmarked yardage, step up to it. I'm out there steady pimping with my Fletcher, you know, release and my good God, what was I shooting? 25 16s or some giant aluminum. So very first target, I get up, do my whole thing and judging my yardage, and doink, shoot, and it goes right over the target. Like the kind, as you can relate to, you don't even hear it land. Like airball. And, you know, everyone giggles and laughs, and I contain my rage, and I'm like, oh, damn. Okay. So I go throughout the thing and finish up. I didn't miss another target because I would have killed myself. But so about a month later, they're like, hey, Greg, there's another tournament. Let's go to it. And I'm like, all right. So I go, very first target. I'll never forget it. It's like it happened this morning. Very first target. It's a Critter Factory. Now it's Raglan 3Ds. It's their grizzly bear on all fours. And I remember staring at this thing for all I had in me. And I thought I had, well, no one told me that there was a 50-yard max.
Mhm.
So I didn't have that as a reference, which allegedly doesn't matter. Well, my first arrow steps up and I shoot that bitch right into the dirt, right in front of the target. Zero, right in the dirt, right in front of the target. And I remember same group of guys, but this time they didn't say a word. And I just remember turning and I looked at them and I said, all right, guys, I'm gonna tell you something right now. I'm either gonna get good at this or I'm quitting, because that's bullshit. And I don't like that. This whole missing thing, I don't mind missing the dot, but this whole searching for stuff in the weeds, I'm not about that. So I get it. I mean, starting off as a hunter probably introduced most all of us. You know, there is a small percentage, but generally speaking, that's how that growth begins. And so whether you started off as a hunter or like yourself in a shop, dude, I mean, as long as you're here participating, you know, that's really what it boils down to. But we all have our stories on how we started. Hopefully yours didn't start with 2 zeros in your first 2 tournaments of your career, but that's pretty much what started. And from there, now look, I was fortunate. I came up in archery in an area that guys were carrying their balls around in wheelbarrows, like Alan Ruddick. You know, I watched. Do either of you guys know who Bob Gentry is? Okay, you probably wouldn't, but he's the greatest finger shooter with a compound bow I've ever seen in my entire life. I have literally stood there and watched Bob Gentry shoot 300 Vegas rounds with fingers with a compound. I've watched him shoot
Wow.
60X rounds. He has shot over 550 field rounds with fingers. It's
Wow.
redonkulous. So, Winner's Choice Custom Bowstring started there. Tom and Thomas Neely, Alan Ruddick, who is, he's getting up in age now, but he's he's won Reading. He was one of the best seniors around. So I was lucky, and we would go down to the Reading course and shoot with Ben Hobbs and Russ Weatherby before he stopped, Tommy Daly. So the atmosphere on the West Coast was at that time was very highly competitive. Now, okay, you bring in a Dave Cousins or a Jesse Bathwater, now you're talking about, another small step up. But dude, these guys were killers. So when I missed that second target, I remember coming home and went over to Tom Neely's house, and I'm like, all right, all right, I need to know what I don't know. And he looked at me in the face and he says, you don't know a lot. And I said, all right, cool. And I have the kind of personality, I don't know about you guys, but I don't, I'm not the kind of guy that wants Vaseline rubbed on my hiney and told that it's special and different from everybody else's. I was coached. If you got to grab me by my ear and slap me on the side of the head and tell me to wake up, well, then do it. I don't mind.
Right.
And I responded, and I respond well to that. And so I quickly, rapidly got good. I don't mean good like I'm out there on the pro tour. I didn't turn pro till like 2005. This was late 99, early 2000. But I started immersing myself into the technical side of it. David Butler, who you probably don't remember either. He was an extremely high level amateur turning pro back then. He was out there winning all kinds of stuff. Shot for Hoyt, and so I was fortunate to be around a lot of people that had a depth of knowledge that is hard to come by. And so having access to that information, dude, this is 2001, 2000. Google? Are you shitting me? I used to check with everybody to make sure no one needed to make a phone call before I got on the internet. All right. So there's no Google, there's no YouTube videos, there's none of that. We literally wouldn't hear about things that happened at the last tournament till we went to the next one. So it was just a totally different time. So, and that's one thing that you guys have the availability to, is that online resource. You come to the ATA, you meet knuckleheads like myself, and now you have access to that network. If you're having a problem with something, well, shoot GP a message. He might know. I get lucky sometimes. And so, it's just one of those things where every generation comes up, and you guys are fortunate that even though you've been, only been shooting a bow for 3 years, because of the internet and videos. And someone asked me a question about a freaking video that I made, good God, 11 years ago, when I actually had when I didn't have gray hair and my beard was still red, not gray. And I was like, holy crap. And so, you guys are coming up at a very good time information wise. So just keep after it, man.
Yeah, that's one thing that I really wish. The internet, it's really nice, but there's times where I wish we had, professional eyes on us, watching us draw, shot cycle, everything like that, because when we watch each other shoot, we don't necessarily know what to fix until, and ATA was a huge eye-opener. We thought we knew quite a bit, and when we got there, we found out we didn't know shit. Nothing. You have, guys we always wonder, hey, how come we always hold at the bottom of the X? And then you have a whole seminar, an hour-long seminar of George Rouse explaining why that is. And it's holy cow, how do you even come up with half the things you're saying?
Right. Well, it's time. George came up in a time where there wasn't the internet either. And so a lot of it was trial and error. And I used to tell people this all the time, and it's still like this. And this isn't necessarily directed at per se, just at you guys, but 10, 12 years ago, I used to tell everybody, if you want lessons, just pay the $75 and join the pro class. and then pay your added entry fee. And they're like, but I'm not going to win. No, I don't either. But guess what? Every single tournament you go to is like going to a 3-day class, because we talk shop, we talk a bunch of random shit too, but shiny objects, and we're off on a tangent. But when it comes time to talk about something in particular, like if one of you guys was to join the pro class and get put into a group and you just randomly ask a question, you are literally not going to be able to comprehend and process the amount of information that's going to be cascaded on you over the next 10 targets, or as long as it takes for that topic to run its course and the guys like myself to be like, I'm tired of talking about that. Let's talk about something else. So if you come to those kinds of events with the sponge mentality, you can learn so much that you would literally have to go to your room at the end of the night and write down everything you thought you heard that day. And so it is an immersion, and joining the pro class is one way to do that. But that's, I still believe that to an extent, but right now here's the negative side of what the internet did, is it gave people a voice who should shut their pie holes.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's guys like Riles, like myself, like, John Dudley and Timmy and Danny McCarthy. And, we've all spent, I can't even tell you how many thousands of hours I've spent in the garage intentionally doing shit wrong to my bow just to see what it does downrange. Finding things that work, for you you're a what, 33-inch draw length or so, Josh?
Yeah, 33 and a half right now with a really long D loop, so probably 34.
Yeah, exactly. So, when people start talking to me about, well, when you measure your knock height, how come your knock's slightly below level? Well, have you ever seen the draw force curve of a bow? It's engineered for 29 and 30 inches. That's why those guys are usually shooting, anywhere from an 1/8, sometimes 3/16. It just depends on the bow and the rig. But by the time you drop over at 31 and a half to 32 inches, my arrow is level at full draw, but it's slightly below at brace height. And
Sure.
people are like, well, it doesn't look like it makes any sense. I say, well, I don't give a shit what it looks like. I'm going off of results. And when I've shot Apex 8s, and Conquest 2s and 3s and 4s, and Ultra Elites, and Vantage 8s, and Vantage Elites, and Vantage Elite Pluses, and podiums, and every PSE Dominators with an L6 cam. That was one of the sickest bows I've ever seen. That was I should have never got rid of that bow. That was a custom build. That I should have never got rid of that bow. But when you see the same, look, I'm not a genius. I just play one on the radio, and it's not profiling, but I'm an observationalist. And when I see the same thing over and over and over and over, I pay attention and I believe it. It's not, Ron Burgundy, read the room. But when I started my nocking point at an 1/8 inch high for 5 years in a row, and then went to 100 yards and started tuning, and always had to raise my rest every single time, without exception, no matter what, I just started setting it lower just to save myself the trouble. Conversely, when I set up a guy who's a 26, 27-inch draw length, I'll generally start him at an 1/8 inch high because of where he is in the draw force curve. So guys like George, they have observed and had conversations for the last 15, 20 years. And when you see it, hear it enough, it just starts to stick. I mean, it's no different than I just got a bunch of messages last week about the forgiveness rating that I developed, like, oh God dang, that had to be 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And basically what I did is, after working on so many damn bows and listening to guys, like, you'll see people post on the internet, like, what was your favorite bow ever? Or when you're working on a bow for a guy and he's like, man, I wish I'd have never got PSE Dominator with L6 cams. Jackass. So if, you hear enough people say, well, I wish I'd have never got rid of that blah, blah, blah bow 3 years ago. That bow is the greatest thing ever. Well, when you hear that enough and you ask enough questions, basically what I did is I started documenting it, and I came up with a ratio. And basically what it is is I used to use axle to axle, but axle to axle works fine. True length matters more, especially now with these huge cam over bows. I just got a PSE Perform-X, and dude, it's a 4.5-inch cam over bow, meaning axle to axle may be one thing, but it's 4.5 inches longer than axle to axle, and that's what determines your string angle. But basically what I did is I figured out after talking to so many people that what I was doing was taking someone's draw length, like for myself, I'll take my 32-inch draw length. I will minus my brace height. So 7.5. So now you have 24.5 inches, and then I will divide that by the axle to axle, and that gives me a ratio. Now, the closer you can get to 0.600, it just so happens, and I'm not a scientist, and I don't even try to play one on the radio, but after dealing with so many people, when you can get that number around 600, 0.600, that bow fits that person, and that person does well with that bow. If you take someone like myself, now I can shoot a shorter bow, but if you take that same configuration and you go with a 32-inch draw length, say it's 6, so then you end up with a 26-inch number, and you divide that by a 33-inch bow, now your number is above or below the window that I came up with for that forgiveness. And literally for a guy, like Josh at 34 inches, he's not shooting a 34-inch bow, period. That's going to be a difficult bow for him to shoot. One, his peep's going to be up by the serving because he's going to need he's going to need a peep as big as a pop can. Mm-hmm. For you, what's your draw length? 27?
28.5.
28.5. So for you to shoot one of these 42-inch axle bows that's actually 45.5 inches long, that string angle is not going to be forgiving for you. You're going to have problems driving that bow. Mm-hmm. Now, if you get down, and this ratio basically proves that out. Like if you do the math and you're at like a 575 or a 615 or a 620, you're going to find that bow is not as forgiving for you as bows that are going to be in the 590 to 605, 610 range. And I can't explain it. It was just an observation thing over years and years and years of listening to people talk and paying attention. And it has literally proved itself out virtually every time. Now,
so is that how you choose your bows based off that that ratio?
For me, it is absolutely. I've been choosing bows off of that for a long time. And this is, look, Dale Earnhardt Jr. could drive his NASCAR car to the store to get milk, but he doesn't because it's not as comfortable to drive, but he could. And so there is an ability level there. You take a Jesse Spankwater and he's going to shoot any bow he wants. I mean, he shot, perfect example is he shot that Hoyt FX, that little bow.
Yeah.
And now he liked it because it had the bigger cams on it. So it was still total length about a 37-inch bow, but he shot the piss out of that bow. He made like 15 podiums a year for 2.5, 3 years in a row and wouldn't even switch. But technically that bow was a little bit short for him. But that's Jesse Broadwater. So yeah. Joe Bag of Donuts at a 28.5, 29-inch draw length is not going to come out with that bow and find it to be that forgiving. But for Jesse, it was. Now, so for me, I've just did it so much. I don't care if a 32-inch bow goes to my draw length or not. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not. I'm a good enough shot that I could definitely make it work, but I'm not perfect. And so especially when I'm hunting, that is something that I want to take into consideration. And so but I get asked bow recommendations probably 20 a week, every week. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this bow? What do you think about that bow? Excuse me. And the very first thing I ask is, what's your draw length? What's the brace height? And what's the axle to axle? Because I've seen it so many times. Why even bother, going through? And I'm not going to lie. I've pissed in some fanboys Cheerios. I'm not going to lie. But, I'm not talking about cam systems. I'm not talking about geometry. We certainly can talk about geometry, but for this ratio, this is not generally for guys at my level Probably, maybe for guys at your level, but this is really for guys like you. When someone comes into the shop and goes, I want a bow. Well, you want him to succeed.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if you run this ratio and you go, all right, bro, let's measure your draw length. And he's a 30-inch draw length. And he goes, oh, I like that 28-inch axle to axle, but no, you don't. No, you don't. And here's why. It's not a brace. It's an overall forgiveness thing. I want you as a customer to succeed. I want you to enjoy this. I don't want you to be a one-hitter quitter. I want you to be a freak like me, and I want you to be in here in 5 more months to buy another bow. I want you ruining arrows because the arrow companies make new ones every day, and I'll sell you new ones all the time. I want you to have fun at this because I want you to think that the other release that I have in my counter is going to be the one that gets you over the top. And if you set them up in the beginning and give them the highest opportunities to succeed, that's what you're going to get. Just like yourself, you got hooked. Well, guess what? Now you have the opportunity to hook other people, and starting them off with a bow that is going to be good for them is paramount to that. So if you want to start running that ratio, I wouldn't necessarily use axle to axle per se, because I developed that when I was shooting the Apex 8s, and they got an idler wheel on the top like this. And but nowadays every cam's the size of 20-inch spinners. Mm-hmm. So go true length, and that's it. Just basically take their draw length minus their brace height, which determines the power stroke, and then divide that by the total length. And you will quickly see. Now, at 34 inches, Josh, I'm afraid, like buying clothes for you and me, we might have tough considerations.
Yeah.
And so, but beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, get as close as I can anyways.
Right. And once, as you guys start and now look, if you've had 52 bows or 51, 54 by next week, you can literally remember those geometries and the bows that shot better for you. And I've gotten so many of these messages that guys are like, dude, after hearing you talk about that, I went and sat down and, dude, you're right. I had this bow that I thought was going to be the best thing ever, and it sucked. And it was like a 618. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I had another one that sucked, and it was like a 570. Uh-huh. He's like, but then my favorite bow ever that I should have never sold was like a 598. I'm like, yeah, well, observationing. Oh, wait, that's not a word. I made that up.
It is now.
It is now. Hit that up on Wikipedia. But no, man, I mean, I think it's great for guys like you to, be getting into the industry, especially working in the shops. You have the ability to touch people. Not that way, Josh, back you have the ability to touch people that are new to the sport. You have the ability to recruit and hook people on this simply through your own enthusiasm and your availability and your willingness to help them succeed.
It's tough being in a position where we are, because we don't have any control the interest in the shop. So we're not owners by any means. We're just employees, mm-hmm. and we're bow technicians. So it's hard to kind of walk that fine line for what you want the customer to get as opposed to how quickly management wants you to do it. Because mm-hmm. if there's a guy that comes in, Josh's height, and says, I want a triax, 28-inch axle to axle, management's going to push us to say, sell him the triax right now.
Well, right. Which is really common up here in Wisconsin. We're typically selling to bow hunters at our shop. Mm-hmm. And you get that guy that's my size, and he wants a triax because he wants to be able to shoot it out of a ground blind.
Right.
And we get it a lot,
Well, I mean, and I get that question a bunch. And first of all, here's the thing is, I would literally walk over to the thing and be like, oh, is that your smart car out there? Oh, what, you don't fit in a smart car? Yeah, well, you don't fit in a purpose either. So
there you go.
Number two is, now, are you guys an outdoor store, or are you an archery store?
We're 50-50, half gun range, half archery range.
Okay. Do you guys carry any ground blinds?
Not so much.
No.
Okay. So here's part two of now, this is the big man argument that I have to have constantly, because, well, yeah. So Number two is I've been in ground blinds. What? No. So number two, get a hold of Travis T-Bone Turner and buy yourself a big boy ground blind, and then you can shoot a bow that's not going to screw you to death on your accuracy and your forgiveness. Because
exactly what I tell people: get a bigger ground blind.
yes, it's a simple mathematical equation. It's a matter of cubic inches. I and you have a lot of cubic inches. And when we proportionately take up X number of the cubic available inches inside of a ground blind, then math comes into play. And when I have a 32-inch draw length and I come to draw, and then my elbow extends X amount behind me and my stabilizer extends X amount in front of me, and that distance is equal to or greater than the dimensions of the inside of the ground blind, we have a problem.
Right.
And that problem is that the companies have done a great job. And by that, I mean, you guys should be thanking Matthews for getting that guy through your door to buy a Verdix. The issue comes into play where you have to educate him. And look, Josh, if you're looking the guy in the eye standing, you literally need to look him in the face and go, that advertising campaign's not for us, bro.
Right. Right.
Literally. Oh, I'm sorry. What spine arrows would you like to shoot? Never mind. You get one choice, the stiffest. And so,
and probably one brand usually.
Right. So there are, and it's not really an argument. It's just an educational opportunity, because everybody that sees the Verdix commercial, and look, Matthews is the best in the industry at getting people through your door. Period. End of story. No one does it better. And so that's their job. They don't have reps. So their job is to spend the money that they don't spend on reps to get people through your door, and they do a great job. Now, once that happens, it's no different than any other product. It's no different than the Ford truck commercial when they're advertising the Ford four-door long bed dually King Ranch freaking Power Stroke diesel tow package that's $82,000. That ain't for everybody. Guess what? That F-150 is.
Right.
That 350 ain't for you, bro. That's you watch the commercial and you're on Ford's bandwagon, and that's great, but that Ford ain't for you. And so that's literally what it is educating the customers. One, they have to understand that you genuinely want them to succeed. And when a big man looks a big man in the face and goes, dude, I'm all about it. Let's get you into a Matthews, but I just need you to understand that the Verdix was not made for you. The ad campaign and the marketing campaign was to get you here to buy a Matthews, and I'm with that. I don't shoot a Matthews, but that's what you want, and that's what I'm going to get you. But I need you to also understand the smart car's not made for you, and neither's the Verdix. And 99 out of 100 times, they will understand that.
Sure.
The problem comes in when someone goes, Verdix, piss on that. You need this RX3, or you need this Excite, or you need this Expedite, or it's when you try to brand switch them when they already know what they want, is when guys get their hackles up, or gals get their hackles up, and they get a little, they get their panties in a bunch. And that's part of the mentality that has been hurting archery. Yeah. Now is the old school mentality of, I don't, if you guys have ever experienced it, but I do not have the Hillary Clinton cough, but is, when you would go into a shop back in the day and you'd be like, hey, I want this sight. No, you don't. You want that sight. Oh, okay. I want this bow. No, you don't. You want this bow. It's either what the shop owner wants or it's what the shop owner has.
Right.
And those days are over, because now people will leave your doors and go shop somewhere else, or they'll buy online. And so those are all educational opportunities for guys like yourself to, one, show the customers your enthusiasm. I picked up on it when we were chatting at the booth. You guys have a very good energy. Your guys' enthusiasm to do a good job is contagious. Didn't make me want to go to a shop and work on bows, because I've did that enough. But your guys' enthusiasm for wanting to do a good job, most certainly, I've never seen your shop. I don't know who owns your shop. I don't know what pricing you have. I don't care about none of that. Having guys like you that are enthusiastic and understand the dynamic at play, that's a place I will send people. Because right, wrong, or indifferent, you guys are genuinely trying to do what's in the best interest of the customer. And that's a model that's working nowadays. So whether you guys own the shop or not, you're obviously still taking pride in what you're doing.
Oh yeah.
And that's benefiting him as well, or her.
Yeah.
Yeah. When one question for you. When did you decide it was time to go pro? How did you know, I guess?
Right. Well, I was working for the railroad. I was an engineer on the BNSF railroad out of Klamath Falls, Oregon. And first of all, the railroad sucks. Warren Buffett can, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, right. He's Oprah rich, so I'll just stop my insult there because I don't want them to knock on the door by the end of this podcast. So for me, I was double dipping. My wife Kathy and I, we had 6 kids between us, so we had a lot of stuff going on, and so for me, it was a little bit different because my introduction to the sport was through Tom Neely and Thomas Neely with Winner's Choice Custom Bowstrings. Like literally when they were developing that stuff, before when they were first making them for Bowtech, when Bowtech first launched bows that far back. And so I started shooting well, but I turned pro in 2005 because I felt a responsibility to let the people behind me win. And by that, I mean, up where I was, there was a group of dudes who, Cabe Johnson from Spot Hog, Gary Curl, Sean Lakin, Jeremiah Merkel. This is in Oregon specifically. When we were all shooting pins, we'd go to a 3D tournament, and the top 3 scores in the entire tournament were from pins because we were the best shooters. And so then we progressed to freestyle, and that was the same thing. And so when we would go to tournaments, it would be us, 1, 2, 3 of us all the time. And so as we would each start shooting more local stuff for us, dude, we would smack fools down, not crush people. Well, that's not what the sport's about. If I'm going to crush somebody, I'm going to drive to Eugene and smash Cabe. If I go, I want to go bang heads with Ben Hobbs, and I want to go shoot against Jeremiah Merkel and these guys who are shooting great scores, but they're my competition. It does me no good, and it does the sport no good to stick back in my local thing and just pound hole on these guys that aren't as good as me, because I remember being not as good. Now, for me, I didn't like being not as good, so I went above and beyond to get good enough. And so it became one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm going to turn pro, not because I'm going to go beat Dave Cousins or Jesse Broadwater or any of these guys. I'm turning pro because that's my responsibility to archery in my area. The guys behind me will now have the opportunity to come to a tournament and not have Greg Poole thump their ass. Now Greg Poole gets to go to big shoots and have Jesse Broadwater thump his ass. But the point is moving up and out of those classes allows the next person to experience what it's like to get better and then reap the rewards, rather than having someone just laying back in the cut, just pounding you out all the time. And so I turned pro, Cabe turned pro, Merkel turned pro. Gary Curl actually went back to pins. Sean Lakin, he kind of just stopped shooting a little bit, but we all progressed to pro. Ben English was another one. And so then we would show up to state events. We would show up to regional events, and we were just shooting against each other like we always were. But now we weren't thumping the hell out of the next group of amateurs coming up behind us, because some people respond better to that than others. I responded good to it, but there's some people that get frustrated and just don't want to come anymore. And that's what I started to feel was going to happen. Was I would go to I remember I went to a shoot at the Kingsley Bowman. This was right in 2005 before I turned pro. And I showed up and I was shooting well. And I heard a guy, an old guy. Anyway, I'm old now, but whatever. But he literally goes, well, pool's here. We might as well just go home.
Damn.
Right. And that happens all the time, guys. Trust me. And not just to me, but to everybody. And so I remember turning to my wife and I'm like, I go, that's not cool. I go, if he's whining or whatever, I don't care. But the point is, one, he's right. In this local tournament in Klamath Falls, yeah, I wouldn't even accept the trophies. And I'd be like, here, don't etch my name on here. I don't want your trophies. I don't want, if it's a coffee cup, I'll take a coffee cup. But if it's a trophy or a plaque or whatever, I'll donate it back to the club, allow the club to reuse it so they can save money. I don't want the trophy. I want checks, cashable ones.
Yeah.
And I wasn't shooting for money there. And so by turning pro, I then literally had to make it known coming to these local events, I would shoot as a guest, or I would tell them I won't turn in my scorecard, or create a pro class. It's only me. I'll pay you an extra $20. No, I don't want an award. And so what that did is that just then freed up the availability. So that was what precipitated me actually joining the pro class. Now, as far as shooting on tour, I started to create products. I actually, speaking of Cabe Johnson, I don't know if you guys know Cabe. Cabe's the owner of Spot Hog. And so he had an FJW fishing seat, and he rigged it up for archery, made some fancy tubes and shit for it. And I sat on it and broke it because I'm not Cabe. And so, so I broke it. And I mean, if you break something, your buddies, well, what do? You got to replace it. So I went down to replace it, and that shit was like $70. I'm like, this is a hunk of crap. So literally in 3 months I told Cabe, chill out, brother. I got you. Just give me a minute. In 3 months, I developed GP Sweet Seat. And most everybody nowadays knows what the Sweet Seat is, but I developed that. I created it. I sold thousands of them bitches. And that's how that came to be. So then I started hitting on tour. My wife and I were driving cross country doing GP Sweet Seats. I would shoot nationally. And then in 2008, maybe 2008 or 9, I was approached by a guy named Blair Sandberg, who was the owner of Bee Stinger Stabilizers. Yeah. And one company had kind of been stepping on his Bowhunter Freestyle patent, and he wanted to create a long bar, and he was told to get a hold of me. So we spoke in Vegas, and he asked if I'd be interested in helping him. And I was currently under contract at the time with the company who had stepped on his patent, Quinky Dink. And once that contract was over, I joined forces with him, and we created the Premier Bar. And I hit the road for Bee Stinger and pretty much turned the entire stabilizer industry on its head. So everything I've done since turning pro has not been just about shooting as a pro. It's been about working in the industry. Patents. I mean, I'm not going to go down the list of stuff that I've, contributed to the industry because that's stupid. But, so my involvement in archery was less about me shooting and more about me being involved in the industry, because this industry is mired in the truest definition of insanity. And that is, everyone's heard it, you can't do the same thing over and over and expect a different result.
Right.
Well, that's what archery is. Archery is mired in that. And the reason for that is because when you do the same thing over and over, the same people make the money over and over. I'm not talking about shooters. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the money and you see where the money funnels and you see who's making the most money and you see where the money's going, it's not hard to figure out why shit hasn't changed. Because who's gonna mess with that? Certainly not the people making the money.
Right.
Here, I give Bruce Cole a lot of props. Bruce Cole will try anything that he thinks will make his events normal. That didn't sound right. Not archery sucky like stuff. Like when we're in Vegas and he has the showgirls come out and walk the archers out. I don't know if you guys remembered that several years ago.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, showgirls. There's women in the casino gambling with less clothes on than that. Did your kids go to the swimming pool? Then shut your face, because there's people with way less clothes on than that. But people bitched and complained, said it was immoral and unethical. I'm like, well, first of all, if you brought your kids to Vegas, you brought your kids to Sin City, so that's on you. But no, you know, and so so my involvement as a pro for pretty much ever has been more than just shooting. And so you know, and it's ironic. I don't remember the kid's name. I apologize if he's listening. But I was approached at the ATA by a kid who works for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. And he asked me the question of, when did I know to pull the pin on the railroad and go full-time archery? And I had to explain to him, and you know, and I don't, you know, like I said, I'm pretty much fresh out of sugar, but I just had to explain to him, number one, I didn't quit the railroad to shoot professionally, and you're not going to either. He's like, well, why not? And I said it as politely as I could, but the bottom line is, if I don't know who you are already, you're not going to be shooting for a living. Not if you're an adult. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I would have already known who you are. I mean, I know that's harsh, but it's less harsh than when I talk to parents, and, you know, parents think little Johnny Rotten and Susie Rottencrotch is going to be the next Jesse Broadwater or Paige Pierce or Levi Morgan. And I don't try to be rude. I try to tell these parents, you know, and I will give parents the opportunity. Do you want the truth, or do you want me to lie? And mistakenly, they always say, tell me the truth. And so what I'll tell them is, how old's your kid? Well, he's 15. Okay. How much has he won? Oh, well, he's working hard to win his first tournament. Okay. Let me tell you something. Do you know, right? Do you know how old Levi Morgan was when he shot his first 60X 5-spot at 20 yards? Do you know?
I do not. No.
11.
Wow.
He was 11. You know how old Jesse Broadwater was when he shot his first perfect 560 hunter round in field? 11.
Amazing.
Correct. So if you think your kid's going to be the next Jesse Broadwater or Levi Morgan, you would already know, and so would I.
Yeah.
So would I. Period. There is a young woman named Morgan Reeves, Rives. She has crazy potential, and I do look for her to make a statement when she becomes an adult in pro archery. But other than that, we would know.
Yeah.
Right.
We would know, because in this day and age of social, how many people have seen the picture of Terry Ragsdale and Jesse Broadwater when he was 11, when they both shot that 560 sitting on that picnic table?
Yeah.
That's pretty much the only evidence of it. What do you think would happen today, this year at Outdoor Nationals? What do you think would happen if some 11-year-old dropped a 560? The entire effing archery world would know about it by the end of the day. I would make sure of it on Bow Junkie.
Right.
Period. If there was an 11-year-old at Indoor Nationals shooting 20 yards, dropping 60X rounds, the entire archery world would know. And so, you know, that is part and parcel to why do you turn pro? When do you turn pro? Well, it's different for everybody. But if your kid is 15, 16 and he's good or she's good at archery, they're not going to be the next Jesse Broadwater, because Jesse Broadwater and Levi Morgan's and that's always what they say. Oh, I think this kid has the potential to be the next Jesse. Too late. Too late. I talked to Dave Cousins on the podcast. Oh God, last year, I think. And Dave Cousins summed it up absolutely perfect. Dave said, I would not want to be an up and coming archer right now, because it is so hard. Yeah. There are so many good archers right now. What are you going to do to shine? What, don't tell me you're going to shoot a perfect score, because that don't get it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so nowadays there's just so much more to it besides the score anyway. I mean, there's some guys out there who can absolutely pound, but their interviews are not the greatest to watch. And so Nowadays, archery has turned into another thing. So as far as turning pro, I'll go back to well, what are you looking to do? If you're independently wealthy and you just want to shoot as a pro, rock it. But like I told this kid at ATA, you have a wife and 2 kids. You're not going to shoot pro archery, not and pay your bills. Does your wife work at a bank? Is she a lawyer or a doctor? Maybe then. But if you have a wife and 2 kids, and you want to shoot professionally, it's not going to happen. So what you need to do is you need to take advantage of the time you can get off on the railroad, and you can shoot as a pro. And if you win one and you get a fat Happy Gilmore check, good for you. Buy mama a new purse. Do what you're going to do. But you still have the benefits, the retirement, and the regular paycheck from the railroad.
Yeah.
Because archery ain't going to be it.